Acts chapter 16, the Apostle Paul was on his second missionary journey. And this time when he was preaching, planting churches, ministering in the region of Turkey, in the continent of Asia, when he was at Troas, God gave him a vision. Of which a vision of a man calling him to enter into Macedonia. Upon receiving that vision, the Apostle Paul bought the boat, crossed the Aegean Sea, and reached Macedonia. And that's how the gospel moved from Turkey to Greece, from Asia to Europe. See, God has often used encounters like this, visions and dreams, to communicate His heart and agenda for missions. You know, out of the many visions and dreams that God has used, there's one vision that stands distinct above the rest. There's one that's so important that's repeated over the pulpit again and again and again. In fact, songs have been written about this vision. And that vision is none other than Isaiah's throne room vision in Isaiah chapter 6. Our text today from verse 1 to verse 8. In this vision, we see the angels cry out, "Holy, holy, holy." Never before in Scripture is God described in such a way. Holy, 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 serving as His core and most evident description of who He is. More importantly, the recipient of this vision respond with the word Hineni. Here I am, adding towards send me, which is, after all, Hineni, the theme of our missional living series, which is a response of surrenderedness, a response of availability, a response of faithful obedience. And each time someone in the Bible responds Hineni, is out of an encounter with God. Specifically, if I could categorize the different type of encounter, it's an encounter with the covenantal God, encounter with the holy God, encounter with the powerful God, and encounter with the worthy God. Of which today we are going to cover the encounter with the holy God, moving away from the last 2 weeks, an encounter with a covenantal God. And hence the topic of this 2 week sermon, this week and next week, is from His holiness to our hunger, of which this week I'm going to focus from His holiness. So without further ado, let's jump straight into the text of Isaiah chapter 6, verse 1. And it begins with this: in the year that King Uzziah died. This is the context of which the vision is based on. A vision of which starts upon the death of a king. Here, King Uzziah has passed away. It's worth noting that King Uzziah is one of the rare and faithful, feel-good kings in the land of Israel. Or because of his faithfulness, God blessed Israel with territorial expansion, economic growth, military achievement and success. However, at the end of his life, King Uzziah fell into sin. Pride took the better of him as he marched into the temple of God and did things his own way in the presence of God. And because of that, God struck him down with leprosy, ending his rule and reign as king. Next line, Isaiah looks up and he says, "Well, I saw the Lord sitting on the throne, high and lifted up." As if the death of a king, sadness, discouragement, disillusionment doesn't change the rule of the king above. He remains unchanged, unfazed, unmoved. He's reigning supreme and, more importantly, in control. That's the response to the context of discouragement, sadness, and disillusionment. In this context, as he's absorbing this visual picture, Isaiah couldn't help but to notice other details as he looks at God himself. He looks to the ground and says, "Oh, the train of his robe filled the temple. You see, the train of the robe in those days for a king represents his prestige, his prominence. And in this case, his prestige and prominence is filling the entire scene. The entire temple, the entire throne scene is filled with his prominence and prestige. Beyond looking down, Isaiah then looks up and he noticed creatures. I put here 2 creatures. Specifically there it says, above it stood seraphim. Never in the Bible described such a creature like this before. In Hebrew, the word seraphim is just fiery one. And it says here, each one has 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. 2 to cover the face, perhaps in God's glorious, magnificent presence, it needs to be shielded. The feet being one of the dirtiest part of the body, it needs to be covered. And the remaining 2, he used it to fly. As Isaiah was describing this visual scene, it wasn't just visual that he wrote down and noted down, but also an audio description of what comes next as the seraphim declares to each other, saying, "Holy, holy, is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. What a magnificent proclamation. An unforgettable audio description that Isaiah couldn't help but take note. You know, in Hebrew, when you repeat the word twice, in this case, holy, holy, it reflects fullness and completeness. So when you see Isaiah 26 says, peace, peace, it gets translated perfect peace. Or when Jesus says, truly, truly, I say to you, it reflects importance. But when it's used 3 times, when a word is repeated 3 times, it's seen used as in a superlative sense, where it's utmost fullness, utmost completeness, utmost importance. And this word to describe God, used in a superlative sense, utmost important, utmost completeness, utmost important, is the word holy. In Hebrew, you get the word kadosh, which gives you the understanding of separation. Something, and in this case, someone is being set apart. So to define and to call God holy, to say that he is holy is to say that he is set apart from 2 key perspectives. The first is that he's set apart from creation. He's outside of the creation order. He is transcendent, outside of creation itself. He is eternal, so to the point that he exists before time itself, and most certainly he will continue to exist when creation ends. He is all-knowing. He knows everything in our mind, in our hearts, and everything in the universe. And more importantly, he is all-powerful. Just by the words of his mouth, creation comes into existence. So that's the first understanding, first perspective when we say God is holy, he is set apart from creation. The next perspective is that he is set apart morally, where he's perfectly moral, where he's perfectly loving, perfectly merciful, perfectly gracious. He is the source of goodness himself, and most certainly, he is the righteous one. He determines what's right and what's wrong, and hence, he is righteous. So every time when we sing the song, holy forever, or anything that describes God as holy, it gives off the idea of separation, where the holy God, he is separated, is set apart from creation, and is set apart morally. This is in a sense, the breakdown, the technical understanding when we call God holy. It is that we have now arrived at the first point of the sermon, and that is the understanding, the definition of holiness, what it means to describe God as holy. It's in the next scene, what's interesting is that when we encounter a God who is holy, there is and will be an inevitable response. First, we see nature responding. It says, the posts of the door were shaken by the voice of him who cried out, and the house was filled with smoke. Nature can't help but respond. We were told by experts that the strongest part of the household is the doorpost, right? The door frame. If there's an earthquake, you go to it and hug it and stay under it. But you know what? Even the doorpost here, it is shaking. Next, we see some kind of smoke, some kind of movement of fire, mist, or whatsoever. Nature can't help but react in such a way. In fact, another example of nature responding in such similar fashion, we see it in Exodus 19, when God descended on Mount Sinai. Next chapter, he gave the 10th commandment. Nature, the mountain itself, shake and tremble. Fire, smoke was filling the entire scene. Nature can't help but to also respond and react to a holy God. And the next scene we see here is not just nature responding, but men responding. Specifically, Isaiah responding. The first words out of his mouth upon encountering a holy God was, "Woe is me." This is the oracle words for curse. So he's trying to say, curse is me. And if I could use vulgarities over the pulpit, it would be me. He is cursing himself. Who does that? So strange, right? But what's interesting is the very next line he's quoted. He says, "I am undone," which suggests some form of disintegration within him. Something within him is moving, churning, ripping apart to the point that it says, "I am undone." Something psychologically, spiritually, physiologically, maybe even is moving within him for him to utter the words, "I am undone." Then the third phrase he uttered was, "I am a man of unclean lips, for I dwell with a people with unclean lips." This is really odd for a prophet to say it. After all, the words that exit his mouth as a prophet is literally the words that God gave him. And yet, he says, "My words, my lips are unclean." You see, the reason why he uttered those words is not because he's comparing himself with his friends, his peers. He's comparing himself with the one who is seated opposite him, the righteous and holy one. And when we compare ourselves with the righteous and holy one, we fail in comparison. Isaiah 64 makes it clear. Our righteousness in comparison to him is like filthy rags. So from this three response, woe is me, curse is me, I am done, there's some form of disintegration, I am a man of unclean lip, a sinner, unrighteous. This response is not uncommon. It's not new. All throughout the Bible, whenever someone encounters the holy God, such responses is also reflected. Let me give you an example. Take Ezekiel, for example. When he encountered God, he fell flat on the ground, face plumb. Next, Job, when he encountered God, he took dust and ashes and he began to despise himself, curse himself. John, when he encountered God, he fell down as if he was dead, as if he fainted. Peter raised his hand on his knees, tell Jesus, go away, I am unrighteous, I am a sinner, stay far from me. Peter, James, and John, when he encountered Jesus at the Transfiguration, when Jesus calmed the storm, they were shaken. They were terrified. It's based on these patterns of response, man's response with a holy God, that the R.C. Sproul, the Reformed theologian, summarizes these effects as the trauma of holiness. When you encounter the holy God, you will be traumatized. You'll be shaken. You say, woe is me, I am undone. In this posture of trauma, Rudolf Otto describes this experience in which you experience three things. You experience his awe, you experience his terror, and you experience his majesty. And this, as he describes, is a crucial Christian experience of which all of us are called to encounter. Encountering the holiness of God. Be traumatized by him. Be experiencing the awe, the terror, the majesty. I like the way how A.W. Tozer summarizes this effect. He summarizes it with just one word. It is, oh, in God's presence. In the presence of his holiness, the possible word that can ever exit your mouth is just, oh. Experiencing his awe, his terror, his majesty. Will you desire an encounter with the holy God? Experience his terror, his awe, his majesty, be undone before him. And especially if you have deep-rooted sins that just refuse to move, sin of pride, unforgiveness, bitterness, in the presence of God, all that gets undone. Will you desire an encounter with the Holy God? My prayer is that you yourself will spend time this week. You yourself will pray for God to remove this blindfold, that you may encounter the Holy God. Be undone. Experience his awe, his terror, his majesty. And hence, church, we arrive at our second point of the sermon. And that's the understanding the effects of encountering a holy God, often described as the trauma of holiness. It's at this part of the vision we can't help but notice there is movement. Suddenly, the seraphim moved. And it says here, then one of the seraphims flew to me, Isaiah here, having in his hand a live coal, which he has taken with tongs from the altar. And he touched my mouth with it, and which he said the following, behold, this has touched your lips. Your iniquity has taken away. Your sin is purged. What we are witnessing here is the work of expiation, often described as the work of atonement. Often we see this in the Old Testament through the work of the temple. Animals get sacrificed, an altar is present. In the New Testament, we see it through the work of the cross, where Jesus, the Son of God, sent from heaven, died on the cross, purchased our sin, redeemed us, and reconciled us back to God. And whether it's New Testament or Old Testament, this work of expiation, work of atonement, it is divine initiated redemption. Only God can orchestrate such a moment, of which the effects of it is that our iniquities, our sin, our unrighteousness is taken away, and our sin is purified, purged, and removed. And we are then deemed as righteous before God. This is the work of expiation. This is the picture of redemption that we are seeing here in this scene. And it's only after this work of expiation, work of atonement, that we finally also hear the voice of God finally speaking after all this time. And here he says, "Whom shall I send? And who will go for us?" Immediately after these words, Isaiah, the recipient of this vision, responded, says, "Here I am, send me." If I could dissect this conversation a little bit, I can't help but to notice the question presented by God, which is two questions here. Whom shall I send? Who will go for us? This question has no details, no context, no content whatsoever. Even for Isaiah, he said, "Yes, here am I, send me," not because of any detail, but solely because of whom is the one calling of him. Church, is God asking you to say yes to him today? Especially when he has not revealed the details of that call. Is he calling you to say yes to him when there's no what, no why, no how, no where? Will you still say yes? This entire missional living series slowly reveals examples of how the community have been living missionally for God. Some has gone on a mission trip, some has sponsored students, some has served across the street in Bidadari, some has served with a community arm, BCCS, some has organized evangelistic outreaches, reaching the elderly, reaching the Chinese community, some has reached the homeless, the disregarded people. My prayer is when you listen to such example, you'll be attentive to God, in him who calls you to live missionally for him. May he be inviting you, but more importantly, calling you to live missionally for him. And when he calls you, when he asks you to say yes, especially when he has not revealed any detail, will you say yes to him? Yes to God's call to live missionally, especially when there's no details whatsoever. For it's not about the what, not about the why, not about the how, not about the where, but just based on who is the one calling and asking you to say yes to. Will you say yes to God today? Church, today we have covered much. From the vision, the throne room vision of Isaiah, we covered the definition, the understanding of the meaning of holiness. We have covered the effects of encountering the Holy One, of which we will be traumatized in awe, in terror, in majesty. When we respond to the holiness of God, we say yes, even when there's no details. So as we come to the end of this service, to the end of this sermon, my prayer is that you won't just listen, but you'll reflect and respond on what you heard. Specifically in regards to the understanding of a holy God, on which he is set apart from all creation. He is set apart morally, perfectly loving, perfectly holy, of which he is the only one in all of creation to bear these characteristics of holiness, of which is the cause behind the cosmic beginning. And if you are wondering, is there someone beyond this? May you come to realize that the holy God is the creator of heaven and earth. He made everything, he made you, and he loves you. And will you respond to him? Will you respond by accepting him as a God? In regards to understanding the effects of the holiness of God, may we respond by saying, we desire to encounter the holy God. We want that blindfold will be stripped away to experience his awe, his terror, his majesty, and just be undone before him. Will you desire an encounter with the holy God? And more importantly, in response to the holiness, will you say yes to him? Especially when no details have been revealed. No what, no why, no how, no where. Just because whom is the one that's asking of you. Will you say yes? So as we sing this song of response, may you reflect, and more importantly, will you respond today? In the presence of the Holy God, even nature can't help but respond. Will you respond to Him, accepting Him as your God, desiring an encounter with Him, to have this blindfold removed, desiring to say yes even when there are no details to the call?